Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Wally Hopp. I'm an associate dean here at the Ross School, and it is my distinct honor to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Mr. Walter Robb, the co-CEO of Whole Foods. And I'm not just saying that because I get to introduce another Wally. I'm saying it because the Ross School talks a lot about positive business, and many of us here believe that a balanced perspective which considers the interests of employees and communities in addition to customers and shareholders is the best way to achieve sustainable success in business. But talk is cheap. Walter is somebody here who not just talks the talk, he also walks the walk, and he's been doing that for a long time. Shortly after graduating from Stanford University, Walter scraped up the money to start his own natural food store from an old auto garage in Weaverville, California. He ran that store for more than 10 years, and in addition to cultivating his business skills, Walter developed a lifelong passion for community building. He participated in planning commission meetings and the Historical Society, and even co-authored a book on the Trinity County historic sites and formed a utility district for the Trinity River Dam. After that initial experience as an entrepreneur, Walter moved to the Bay Area to manage the Berkeley Living Food Store and ultimately became the manager of all three of that company's store. He then did a stint in marketing and sales for a local brand of organic rice before getting the entrepreneurial bug again. Walter secured a lease in Mill Valley, California, and raised half the capital to start a new natural food store. But then, as he describes it, John Mackey made him an offer he could not refuse: to build and run the Mill Valley store as a Whole Foods market. After some soul searching, Walter agreed. He managed that store for a year before becoming the president of the Northern Pacific region, which he grew from 2 to 17 stores. After that, he quickly progressed through the roles of Executive VP of Operations, COO, co-president, and finally in 2010, co-CEO. In keeping with his dedication to the community building, Walter has consistently served in leadership roles beyond his role at Whole Foods. He currently is on the boards of the Whole Planet Foundation and the Retail Industry Leaders Association, and is chairman of the board of the Whole Kids Foundation. He also serves on the advisory board of the Organic Center for Education and Promotion and is on the board of regents for the University of the Pacific. Finally, despite his trim and youthful appearance, Walter has 3 children and 4 grandchildren, which is a testament to the power of Whole Foods, I guess. Anyway, please join me in giving a hearty Ross School welcome to Mr. Walter Robb.
Thank you, Wally, for the introduction to Walter and to this session. A couple of logistical points as we kick off the conversation. Thanks to the co-sponsors, the Center for the Positive Organizational Scholarship, the Ross Leadership Initiative, the Erb Institute for Sustainable Development, Net Impact, and the 100-100 Initiative, which really focuses on the last 100 days of an MBA's career here at Ross and the first 100 days in their new job. How many graduating MBAs are here right now? Welcome. I'll clap.
That does not sound good.
I'll clap in 2.5 months' time. Instead of a pre-packaged conversation with or presentation from someone who is clearly keynote caliber presenter, we're going to have a conversation with the Ross community. Walter knows what the first question is going to be that I'll ask. And he knows what the last question I'm going to ask will be. In between, doesn't know what is coming up. This is an interactive session, so I'm going to invite you to keep your phones and laptops on, if you so choose. Turn them to silent, please. And you can email and tweet your questions at any point in this conversation to Ira and Sabrina, who will be triaging the 400-plus flows of input into the conversation from this evening and picking out some juicy questions to ask. To help with the timings of the tweets, here's the general flow that the conversation is going to take. I'm going to talk about Whole Foods Market. We're going to talk about Walter's leadership, about business and society, business education, and then final thoughts and wishes for the Ross community. So you can time your tweets accordingly. So who do we have on the stage with us? Ira, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
My name's Ira Rigo. I'm a first-year MBA student. Used to be a teacher through Teacher America in New York City. And I'm excited to be part of this speaker series and excited to have you here.
My name's Sabrina Sullivan. I'm a second-year herb student and recovering consultant.
And I believe that you now know Walter Robb. Walter, I'd like to add my welcome for being here today and also for spending the whole day with us today. We had 2 classes of MO 637, which is social entrepreneurship. Walter and the Whole Foods team joined both of those classes for today as the focus of live cases. So before we kick off, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for coming tonight. I'd like to thank Jerry and Chris for the welcome that we had at the school today. We did have a wonderful chance to hang out with a couple of classes, and I'd like you to meet our team. Whole Foods here, this part of the country in the Midwest is one of 12 operating regions for Whole Foods, and our whole team from the Midwest, our senior leadership team is here. So I'd like them to stand up. Michael, Red Elk, Bidget, and David Schwartz. If you have a product you want to sell us, you want a job or something, these are definitely the folks that you want to see, right? So, and our crew, we'll talk a little bit more about our project in Detroit and a little bit later, but our team from Detroit is also here. Our store manager, Larry Austin. Larry, can you stand up so folks can see you? Larry has also been recognized as a global all-star for Whole Foods this past year, and he's going to be, that's the top award that we have in our company. And then Amanda Musilli, who is, can you stand up, Amanda, please? The soul of us. Amanda has been at the very beginning of our work in Detroit, starting in January of 2009. She's been the one that, she lives in the center of Detroit, and it's been the one that has helped to build the relationships there. And if you have any interest in how that's all happened over the last 3 years, you definitely should spend a few minutes talking to Amanda. She's an amazing person, amazing representative for our company. So thank you, Amanda. And we have a wonderful guest from New York City, right? Monica, stand up, just introduce yourself there. Monica, yeah. She's checking out Michigan, you know, she's checking it out, so. Right answer. And then our team from Cranbrook is prepared to eats for you for afterwards. So we have Kevin, Jen, and Susan over there. Where are you guys? Right there, yeah. You can make it through the presentation. The eats are definitely good on the other side. So, and I wanted to recognize also Miguel Sosa. Where's Miguel? Miguel was actually in our class 2 years ago. And when we had our first community advisory meeting in downtown Detroit, this was in 2009, Miguel came, along with another Ross student, and has maintained a connection with us ever since that time. So it's great to see you again, Miguel. And also, I wanted to introduce to you a friend of mine who's actually a writer, who's written a terrific book, which if you haven't read, I really encourage you to read it. It's called A New American Way of Eating. As it turns out, she's from New York City, but she's got a fellowship to work at the University of Michigan this year. She's a journalism fellow, and she can only stay for a few minutes, but I wanted to introduce Tracy McMillan. Tracy, can you raise your arm up there? And what Tracy did is she went undercover for a year. She worked at a farm, she worked at a restaurant, and she worked at a grocery store. And she explored these questions about access to food, what companies say, what companies do, all while living the actual, she didn't allow herself any perks. She made the whole thing work. And the book is that kind of the story of her journey of the year and the things that she learned. And so a fantastic book, I really recommend it. And we've had her come down and talk with our team as well. And then finally, I want you to meet my friend Orrin Hesterman from Ann Arbor, right here. Everybody know Orrin? Stand up, Orrin. Orrin, on these whole questions about food access, Orrin is one of the national leaders. He started an organization called Double Bucks. Double Up Bucks, or I may have it a little bit wrong, Fair Food Network. But the Double Bucks is the signature program, and that's the program where if you use food stamps, you get, and you participate in this program, you get to, and you buy produce, you get double the value of the food. And he's done that. This is not just, he's got a lot of funding from Kellogg and other foundations, but they're doing the hard research around showing how some of this plays out. And so we really enjoy being partners with them. They do some terrific work at the Fair Food Network. Check them out on the web if you get a chance. So thank you for indulging me in those introductions.
Well, I hope that you'll all stay for the reception afterwards so that people can come up to you and talk to you and ask questions as well.
You bet.
Thanks.
I don't know what the first question is to you, by the way. I don't really know.
That was it.
Oh, okay.
But
It's all.
the first question actually is, you've been with us now for 8.5 hours. What are your impressions of the Ross School so far? No pressure.
Yeah. It's cold here. My impressions are that, we had a particular assignment in our class, which was to, a lot of you are actually thinking about your next steps, and you're thinking about, some of you had consulting backgrounds, some of you have this is your experience here, I guess. It's hard, a wide range of folks, but I think my experience is that you guys are facing these questions honestly, and you're caught between somewhere that what you're theoretically learning and what actually happens in the real world, and I think you're exploring those convergences of that, and that's a healthy thing. And I've been really enjoy the perspectives. We had a lot of the folks in the class were given an assignment to help us think about this question: as you grow, how do you keep your soul? How do you keep a culture strong as you're growing and creating opportunity? And we got some I would say our team felt we got some very interesting ideas from the class about how we could think about that question differently. And that was really, really helpful. So we appreciated it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, let us roll into the conversation proper. And to do so, I'd like to share a data set. This will look very familiar to the Whole Foods team. It's the NASDAQ stock price for the last 3 years, up to about a couple of weeks ago when I first decided to put together the slide. And so the progress of Whole Foods in the last 3 years has been, well, it's hard to argue with that slope. What I'd like to do is add a data set on top of it. So the first time that I reached out to a Walters assistant, Wendy Armstrong, who might be on the live stream right now, was on the 25th of July, 2010, to come join the class. The class itself was in February of 2011. And then Walter's come back today. Interesting. But the thing is that because we have such Midwest modesty here at University of Michigan, we know that only a tiny fraction of this is due to us. Right. Instead, I'd like to use that as a tongue-in-cheek, honestly, everyone, especially the Whole Foods team.
British humor.
Monty Python is the next question. We'll go there. As a setup for the question of, so really, what has led to the spike over the last 3 years? Was it a success that had a long time in coming?
Well, the company's 32 years old. Just so for those of you, I don't know how much everybody know Whole Foods? Company started in 1980, Austin, Texas. The co-CEO and the founder of the company, John Mackey, who, by the way, just released a terrific book called Conscious Capitalism. It's on Amazon, and it's in our stores, and it's a kind of a wonderful, the subtitle is Liberating the Heroic Spirit Business. It's kind of a path forward for how a business can think constructively about their role in civil society, and I really recommend it to you. But I think in the last number of years, it's a happy combination of a number of things. One is, I think that for whatever reason, these ideas about positive business, health, wellness, hit a tipping point, and where people began to realize that there really was a connection between diet and health and wellness. You look at the spend in society, $3 trillion on healthcare, 20% of the GDP, simply unsustainable. And when you really examine that question at the end of the day, there's no easy answer. There's no pill to take. There's no operation coming. There's only more individual responsibility for folks to realize better health, along with an appropriate safety net in a society. And so that is, I think media, science, all is coming to the conclusion that this is the sort of thing that health and wellness is here to stay, and maybe the path forward. I think at the same time also you had this sort of greater narrative about various businesses that were contributing to, that were taking on a broader idea of what was possible in society for business. And you have many great companies out there, a Nordstrom, Southwest Airlines, many companies they're doing amazing things, and not just focusing on profits, but thinking much more broadly about how their success is tied to the success of their stakeholders, and particularly their communities and the global community. And I think those stories are starting to be told a little bit more, even though at the same time we're hearing a lot of very negative things, right? Lots of stories that turn your stomach about people cheating and ethical breakdowns and these sorts of things. You also have you have a lot of these positive stories about what's possible in business, and you have a kind of a new spirit of entrepreneurship that's kind of reemerging, because if you can't get a job, you might as well make a job, right? By the way, note to team here, lots of work to do. Even if there's not jobs out there, you can make your work. You can start a company. You can create a job. So I think it's the combination of the science, the media, the emerging business thing. I think the interest in food, and I think we did a few things right. I think we have been in the right place at the right time, because we're moving in the direction things are moving. But I also think we're the leader in this sort of category, this sort of health and wellness lifestyle category, and it's all that we do. We're not grafting something else on. It's who we are. It's who we have been since day one, which is to bring healthier foods to the world. That's what we're here to do. And so I think the authenticity of that comes through. We're not always getting everything right, but I think it's the confluence of all those things together that has led to these results. Which, by the way, I mean, this is only one measurement of your company's performance and success, and it's not even really the best measurement, and it's not even that long lasting, because if you spend your time chasing the chart, you're really going to be going down you're barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. You got to spend your time thinking about how to build a sustainable, enduring company around real values, around real purpose, around real people. And when you do those things and you keep your eye on those balls, then you have the chance to have this sort of success, right? And I mean, hey, yes, you're happy to have it, and it's wonderful. And we talked about that today. I may be running on a little bit too long. I'm running on too long here, but that means sort of yes, maybe. But one of the advantages of being a public company, and we've been a public company for 20 years now on NASDAQ, is that the liquidity that it offers our team members. This past year, our team members realized $200 million in benefits as a result of being able to cash in. 40% of our team members have either an option or an equity interest in the company. That's simply very few companies in the American corporate landscape have that. Such Starbucks might be another one like that, where team members have that sort of ownership interest in the company. So an advantage of all this has been for them. They've really participated and been able to translate their hard work into some real wealth.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to hear you describe this, and the first question was very much deliberately rooted in the financial performance of the company. When we talk about positive business here at the Ross School of Business, we're often talking about the convergence of both making money and being able to have impact socially, environmentally through that core business strategy and through the nature of the business, not as a side product or a CSR program.
Right. Don't like that term at all either, CSR. I really don't like that term. Do you guys like that term? I mean, it sounds like something that somebody's got it over here. Real sustainability is built into the very core of who you are and how you operate. Somehow this conversation about sustainability, which is not a very helpful word anymore, is because it's not very clear what it means. Mm-hmm. So people should be more specific with it, but companies got to start thinking about putting that at the very center. Operating sustainably means you're thinking about your circle of stakeholders all the time and making decisions, and that's what true sustainability looks like, in my view. Mm-hmm. So.
And I build from that, actually, and note that Whole Foods is very specific when it comes to what the impact is that Whole Foods is trying to have and that you're trying to build the company with. You talk about whole foods, whole people, whole planet.
Right.
You have defined what that means and build the company towards that. But I'd like to take a step beyond that and talk about the foundations that you have as well. Mm-hmm. There are 3 foundations, and I'll set you up to ask about the third one. The first one being Whole Planet, with microfinance programs in 55 countries now. Whole Kids, aiming to end childhood obesity. And there's one that you will not find on the website right now. What's that one?
Whole Cities Foundation.
What's that about?
So our third foundation that we'll start this year is called Whole Cities Foundation, and it is the purpose of the foundation is to broaden access to fresh, healthy foods in underserved communities. And it's a natural sort of extension of our work as grocers. But if you look across this country and you go to the USDA, you'll find a map of thousands of underserved areas across the country, many of them in urban cities, right? But as we thought about this question, we thought we can do something about this. So this foundation, this foundation will allow us to, that foundation can't actually operate stores because the IRS says we can't do that because that's our core business. But the foundation's job will be we'll be able to fund research and support all the things around having a store. As far as I can tell from our learnings in Detroit, you all know we're opening a store in Detroit June 5th. It's at the corner of John R. and Mack. We've been working on that for 2.5 years, and there's not a lot of grocery stores around there, so it's kind of a big step in many ways for us and for the community. But what I've learned from that experience, and Amanda can tell you all the detail that you want, is first of all, it's about trust and faith. The first thing when you show up there in this thing is it's not at all about anything other than we don't actually really believe you, or what are you doing here, or we've heard it before. And until you actually establish some basis for a relationship, you can't do any work at all. There's no trust and faith. So, the first meetings we had at the Eastern Market were all about, we want you to sign an agreement, we want you to do this and all that. We just had to get the dialogue started. And second of all, you realize there's cultural differences, right, in different communities. Detroit, we're looking at Newark, Southside Chicago, there's different ethnic makeups, cultural appropriateness, all these things about how people think about food and access. And then there's the question of education. We've been meeting with some pastors in Detroit. We're meeting some tomorrow and some other community activists. And these are big questions. There's some people don't have power and some people don't have the ability to cook. And you can talk about access all you want, but if they can't translate the food into something at home. And we found that in Detroit, for example, if you look at the public health statistics, you have a human life is 10 to 12 years shorter than outside of the city around a particular circle, right? What's the correlation? It's hard to say, but these are questions I think as we consider the future of our country, we consider the moral nature of the sort of right to fresh, healthy food. We consider all the implications of that. These are really serious questions, and I hope the whole city's foundation will be able to explore those sorts of questions. We'll partner with Orrin's organization, Fair Food Network, but Whole Foods will also build stores. We know how to build stores and operate stores, and we will build stores, some of which will be called Whole City stores, and those Whole City stores will be 100% of the profits will go back to the community, 100%. We've never done that before through the whole city's foundation. So I'm hoping that through this foundation that we will make a contribution to what I see is one of the great moral challenges of this time, which is to bring fresh, healthy food to more people.
I've got 2 quick follow-ups, and then I'm interested to hear the questions and comments that I imagine are burning up Sabrina's iPad right now.
Or not.
The question for you is to elaborate on what do you think Whole Foods has been doing differently in Detroit to business as usual that enters that kind of market?
I mean, what's different about it is it's not a typical market for us. It's a stretch, quite frankly, for us when you look at the demographics and the psychographics for us to go there. But at this point, we have almost 350 stores. We have enough size and scale and strength as a company to be able to take this sort of step. What's different about it is we're having it's a different customer group. It's got different customer interests. Amanda's been leading a advisory, 23 citizens in the last 1.5 years where we've been asking them these questions and seeing our blind spots and asking questions about price and product and selection, and we're going to have to challenge ourselves to do this and do it in a way that serves the community. But I think that it's been a wonderful learning for the company, and I think it's going to. I thought about this last night. I think that we can help to make this store kind of one of the points of lights in Detroit, because there's lots of awesome things happening in Detroit. I hope that we're a big enough company that store and that community can be a point of light for the rest of our company, that we're going to take the learnings there to make us better. So, yeah, we're good grocers. We know how to do that. We know how to put the stores together. We know how to put the team members in place. We know how to make a happy place to work and a happy place to shop. And I think we're excited to take this next step and see what we learn.
When I was talking with you and the team about 18 months ago about the Whole Foods startup, one of the things that was really striking to me was the depth of understanding that you had of how some companies and some leaders are coming into Detroit with a lot of fanfare and then leaving soon afterwards, and that the continuity and commitment would be key to to success there. That was really very visible. So I wanted to attach that to a story, and then we'll get the questions. The story is, does 1969 mean anything to you, the year?
Go on.
Michigan people probably have a connection to that. 1969 was Bo Schembechler's first season as coach of the Michigan football team.
Yeah. Do you have a football team in Michigan?
We win occasionally. It's pretty good. That preseason, Bo warned his players that it was going to be tough. 140 players signed up for preseason that year, and Fritz can tell me if it's true or false. 75 stayed on the roster for the start of the new season, which is an unusual dropping out rate there. But the team then went 9-0 for the season before losing to that team who shall not be named in these parts in the final game of the season. Bo had put up in that preseason a sign in the locker room which said, "Those who stay will be champions." And I think that sums up really nicely the philosophy from which the Whole Foods Detroit team has been building this so far. So what I'd like to do is actually invite real quickly Amanda and Red Elk and Larry. And we have a little gift for you to take away with you. Here you go. Maybe this can go into the office.
Thank you.
So, what are people saying? Take it away.
Can I just say one thing before I do that? I was thinking another thing that, since many of you are business students, before we go to the questions, is that another reason I think that, we had, like every company, we were really challenged in the downturn, big time. And Bill George wrote this wonderful book that was very helpful to me called Authentic Leadership. And in it, he talks about crucible moments that you have, both as an individual in your life, that's true already, even though you're younger. And then also crucible moments also happen for businesses where these are defining moments where you have to dig deep. And look, nobody owes you anything. The marketplace doesn't owe you anything. You have to earn your success each and every day. And for us in 2007-8, when the downturn happened, our sales just went, whew. Yeah, we went from positive 10 comp, which is year-over-year sales, to negative 5 comp in a very short time. And I had never seen or experienced anything like that. And in that time, our company had to come to grips with a lot of things. One, that we were less relevant to people. People found our pricing less than compelling. Even our value pricing message was out of step with where folks were. We were spending too much money on building stores. And I think more importantly, I think we realized collectively that we were adrift from what we were there to do, which was to really bring our core. We were expanding so quickly, we were going growth for growth's sakes, which is always a mistake. And fortunately, we were able to sort of correct and dig deep and realize that we gave up the goal of being the biggest grocer in the world and determined that we were going to do best at what we did and stick to our core values and sustainable growth. But out of that experience came an appreciation. I think maybe you guys remember that experience of how much more you appreciated your own community, because it at least was a place where you knew things versus a world that seemed way out of control after Lehman Brothers collapsed, right? It seemed like every day there was some new piece of information. And so I got thinking about our core value, which is caring about our communities and realizing that, wow, the way that Whole Foods is going to grow is one community at a time. And even while we have a big goal up there, I think we went back to our knitting, and we ate a lot of humble pie because our stock went down to $7 or something like that. I mean, we actually, I think I can be said now, we hired Goldman Sachs to prepare us in case somebody came after us. We thought somebody might try to swoop us up on the cheap. What they don't know is the Whole Foods culture is so rich they would have got indigestion. It's not really, you can't just take this company over because if you don't understand how the culture works, you're going to have a lot of problems. But I think that time was a crucial moment for Whole Foods about realizing that that you can't grow just for growth's sake. That's not a good thing to do. That you gotta be clear what you're here to do, and you gotta hold to your values and let that guide your decision making. And as a result of that, I think we came through that clearer, cleaner, stronger, more focused. These are good qualities in a competitive marketplace, and it's served us well. So,
thank you.
yes.
Ira, take it away.
There's a lot of conversation, I guess, particularly with that graph,
Sorry about
how you balance, particularly being a publicly traded company, how you balance altruism, your mission, your values that you're just speaking with profitability and responding to to stockholders? How do you achieve that balance? How do you respond to the CNBC culture and still be Whole Foods?
Well, the best way is to perform. Because if you perform, they got nothing to say. Right? So, except thank you very much, and I'll, and so I think ultimately, if you believe in what you're doing and you're able to put up good results, then they're satisfied. John likes to say that the investor stakeholder is actually the easiest to satisfy because that's really all they want is they want their money and they don't really ask a lot of other things unless you're messing around with governance or something like that. But look, I think it's, in our view of the world, it's not the reason we exist. We never started Whole Foods, or John didn't start Whole Foods, or I didn't start to make money. We started it because we wanted to create a change in the world. And interestingly, it was with Michael Milken. Some of you know him from Drexel Burnham in the 80s. He financed over 3,000 companies. And he made the statement of all the 3,000 companies he financed, the only one that he remembers actually started the company for money. So this sort of idea that, you're focusing on what's the why you have a company and your purpose, your mission, whatever you want to call it, that's the most important thing. And I think you keep that on there. But that being said, the investors are an important stakeholder. 85% of Whole Foods is owned by institutions, shareholders. We have to meet with them. We got to go to Wall Street. We got to do those sorts of presentations at conferences. They deserve to have the information. You're respectful from them. We learn from them. They're never satisfied in some ways because they want more growth or they want more profits, and it's always can be better than what it is. But I'll give you an example that was very constructive. A few years ago, they started hammering on us about return on invested capital, and we were down in the sort of 6-7% range in 2008 after we bought Wild Oats. We deployed, that was a $750 million purchase, but our return on invested capital was down to 6%. And really best-in-class sort of standard is somewhere in the 15% range, assuming you're not doing large movements of money. And we have just said, you know what, you're right about that. We're not being good stewards of capital, and we went to work on lowering the cost to build the store. And we've gotten our returns up this last quarter. We were sort of in the 13.5%, 14% range. We've hit 15 a couple times. And that was an example where I thought that the investor stakeholder was very helpful to us doing a better job stewarding our business. But I think how we balance this, like if you started, it's always a challenge, there's just such a disconnect between somebody who's thinking about the business from quarter to quarter and somebody who's thinking about trying to build a business to last 100 years. And how you align those, you're never totally aligned, but you just find those common areas where you need to communicate and hopefully meet the needs. And that's about the best it gets because they're just thinking about it differently. They're thinking about money and return on money, and we're thinking about something else. So you find those places where there's the common ground and you try to work on them together. Yeah.
So kind of going from that, there's a lot of conversation on growth and what your strategies are, but in contrast to maybe the financial side of things, your aspirational goal is to bring sustainable, high-quality food to the world. So if we assume that that's 7 billion people, what are some of the challenges you see in being able to deliver towards that goal, no matter how much? But what are some of the challenges maybe that you're dealing with now to deliver sustainable, high-quality food to the world?
Well, first of all, in goals like that, I mean, the mission of Whole Foods, the purpose of Whole Foods has actually evolved because we started out with the high-quality foods and a workplace based on love and respect. We've actually taken on bigger goals now, which is like the world. We want to change the agricultural system. We want to change capitalism the way it's talked about. We want to end poverty in the developing world. We got some big, hairy goals out there that we want to pursue, and those are aspirational. So in some senses, you don't necessarily know how you're going to get there. You want to put the thing out there, the big idea, and that helps us somehow like a sonar signal. It kind of guides you towards those things, and you keep moving in that direction. But I mean, the challenges are that as you grow, I mean, we're growing now faster than we ever have, but we're constantly aware of our ability to keep the culture and the values strong. An example, we've been on this Fortune's Best Company to Work for ever since it started. This last year we dropped 20 slots down into the 70s. Very concerning for us. I mean, it's only 800 team members filling the survey out, but it's told me that there's sort of a red flag, kind of a stress point in the organization about that. So yeah, we could open 100. We have plenty of money. We have $1.2 billion on the balance sheet, no debt. So we could get the money. We could borrow $50 million together at 2% tomorrow if we wanted to. You can see the way the corporate bond market's working right now. There's lots of money out there for cheap. But we cannot grow that fast and do it in a way that honors the people and honors the team members of the company. So we're not going to do it. And so could we get there faster? Probably. But if we can't get there in the way that's true to ourselves, we're not going to do it. The other challenges are that just the way that, the status quo versus the change. The people that are tied to the status quo of how things are, they're really committed to that. And it's really hard to change people's minds. If you think about where we started, Whole Foods was what would you call it? I mean, kind of an irrelevant 25 years ago, and people thought it was a fad or going to go away. And it's taken all these years just to fight to get to this place now where, well, about 5 years ago they stopped saying it was a fad. But so a lot of times you're pushing up against very entrenched forces or points of view that have to at some point knock down for that sort of big change to happen. And sometimes we found that the government is impossible to, they just don't move and change. And so ultimately, we are at a point now where we can take big steps and we can actually create change through those steps. And I'll tell you, we're going to do something in about 3 weeks that's going to be kind of big in the food world. Can't tell you what it is tonight, but that'll be an example, I think, where we're trying to use our presence and whatever leadership presence we have to say this is something that we think should change in how food is happening. And so the challenges are the entrenched forces. The question is, do you have the courage to go out there and do those sorts of things that'll create the change?
Definitely.
Related to that idea of presence, I guess you kind of framed like the good side of that presence, but Megan has a good question about local businesses and Whole Foods interaction in the ecosystem of local businesses. How do you, kind of the negative sides of being the behemoth company coming into a new...
Well, a lot of people get attached to their ideology about that too. If something's big, it's bad. If something's small, it's good. I mean, really? Is the depth of the thinking? Because where is it written? I didn't see that come down with Moses' tablets, right? I mean, it's just not true. Why can't it be that big is good? And why can't it be that bad has some things to learn? That's not helpful. If we're talking about creating the type of change in the areas that we want to create, it's going to take all size businesses. And what matters more to me is what are the ethics, the values, the compass of these businesses we're talking about, small or large. But the ecosystem is a very good way to think about business, but also think about the world. We're clear, and I think particularly the younger generation is clear, this is an interdependent world. If you're making decisions without respect to that interdependence, you're probably going to go off track. And you're probably not going to be relevant 5 years from now because your customers are going to start to expect that of you, right? So your question again, there was something I wanted to say. What was it? Yeah.
It was like the relationship with local businesses.
Yeah. Okay. So here's an example where we learned a lot. Michael Pollan, who Tracy knows well, wrote a book called Omnivore's Dilemma in whatever year, and it just skewered us, right? Michael didn't have the kindness to call us first, but he just wrote it. I'm not sure it was all accurate, but what was accurate was the sort of sense that we had drifted a bit from our commitment to the local suppliers, because as we were growing, so what happened was we created a new core value that made explicit win-win relationship with our suppliers. We rededicated ourselves to creating a local buy infrastructure. We set up a local loan program. We've now loaned over $8 million low-interest loans to our producers. We make equity investments in certain producers. And I think arguably, even Michael tells me now that when he goes to conferences that he feels like we're really doing a good job in terms of supporting local producers. I don't think there's another grocer other than maybe, Zingerman's, of course, does a great job here in Ann Arbor, but I think we're doing a very responsible job in terms of supporting local producers. And I gave Red Elk a goal when we did Detroit. I said, Red Elk, when we open the new store in Detroit, I want you to find 100 new producers in Detroit to supply the store. And he said, how about 50? And because it turns out that Detroit does not actually have a lot it has a lot of gardening, but does not have a lot of value-added production happening. Even made in Detroit is not actually made in Detroit. So we want to actually, create that opportunity for the ground up. So I think we've made a lot of progress on that, and I think we have a responsibility to use some of our purchasing power to help build the local economy, and that's what we're trying to do better and better than we did a few years ago.
Thank you. We're going to have to keep moving through the conversation and the topics. On the next area for us to focus on and continue with your tweetage. This is good stuff. I've just made up a new word, I just realized. We're going to focus on leadership. And this will be an abstract question. I can follow up with a specific if it'd be helpful. But tell us something that would help us understand your philosophy and approach to leading Whole Foods, personally,
Personally?
your personal style.
Well, here's the thing for you. I mean, I'm a type A, no surprise maybe, but I'm a very competitive person, and particularly when you're younger and you're trying to make a living, the wolf's always at the door, and you're trying to do that. So I've honed my competitive skills, particularly when you're in the retail food business where things can go bad. You gotta, and so in the early years, I think I really concentrate on pushing and driving. And Regional President Michael's Pier in New York says that spending a day with you, Walter, is like spending a day with a blender. You know, so I mean that sort of push. It has its healthy aspects, but it has its unhealthy aspects, particularly as it relates to other people. But in the latter part of, as I go on now, I've learned much more about developing the love and compassionate part of leadership. And Michael and I were talking about this earlier. I think as a company grows, one of the things that lets a company grow is for leaders to let go. Right, because if you don't let go, there can't be the space created for other people to step in. If you don't give the responsibility away, there's no way for the thing to get bigger. It gets smaller, it gets tight. You see this with entrepreneurs who can't let go, right? And the company can't go anywhere. But you see entrepreneurs that can let go or get forced to let go, the company starts to go. And so I guess I've learned that leadership is, it's much more about, it's obviously, the main thing is to be authentic to whoever you are. You can't try to be like somebody else, or you see some general pattern, that's how you're going to lead, You all have your individual qualities that are true for you, and you need to lead from that place, because that's the place that touches other people. If it's real and authentic, sincere, part of who you are, then you're going to be able to affect other people. And you don't get work done by yourself, you get it done with a team. And you do it together, and part of what I think is secret about Whole Foods, the secret sauce of Whole Foods, is our team members, and we really tried to build this company around having team members flourish, around celebrating their creativity, their intelligence, their abilities, creating a company where that's possible. And so leadership really becomes about being a midwife, or a coach, or a facilitator, or a supporter, more than anything else.
I want to follow up on that, because I asked your team members and some of our mutual acquaintances for stories about your leadership, and they told me some terrific stories. And they also...
When did you do this?
It's amazing what preparation I did for today. You don't get graphs like that without preparation. But the funny thing was, they all said the same thing following it, which is, I think the world of Walter, and I wouldn't want to disrespect him or offend him in any way by sharing something that would make him in any way uncomfortable. So would you mind having this as deep background? Which I thought said a lot about you as a person as well. So I'm going to share instead one little story of how I've seen your leadership that is kind of distinctive in the Whole Foods spirit. And then we'll move on to another question. The last time you came in, Walter, and I don't want to imply this will be a precedent for tonight, we had the class in the afternoon, we had the session in the colloquium, we had 120 people come to that one, and food afterwards. The last people to leave that room that night were me, Walter, and Amanda at about 10:20 that night. Walter stayed until the last person, again, not a precedent for tonight, but the last person who'd wanted to speak to him had left. I'll contrast that with certain other guests who we have come through the school who it's very hard to make connections with and access to. And I think that without saying it, talk is easy, but through your actions, you demonstrate a very different kind of leadership. One small thing that goes with that, though, Walter, is that Walter didn't actually get to eat that night, despite providing food for 120 people, which is kind of rough. So you've made sure that there will be food tonight, which we appreciate. Yeah. But also, we thought you might want a snack at some point. So one of the people you spoke to that night was Devin McIntyre, who's an Herb 3, and your conversation was inspiring to him, and he started up a food-sharing local organic business called Real Good Foods. So,
thank you, Devin.
If you
enjoy, thank you very much.
Should you get hungry tonight? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I got all kinds of things in here, and I told you up there.
That's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daddy. So if you get peckish, feel free to eat. I will have my hand slapped for bringing food into Blau, but it would be worth it.
Thank you.
So what we'll do now is go on to I think we should take more questions from the
Yeah.
audience. I think we should go there.
Seth has a pretty good question related to leadership around who are or who were your mentors in this, or what resources inspired you in your work?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and Schopenhauer said life makes more sense looked at backwards than forwards, right? And you can look back now and see the things that really influenced you, and I hope that, we talked about this earlier in class, but when you guys are thinking, you're putting your lives together, there's always comes those moments where you have to make these decisions about what you're going to do with your life. And I really urge you, from this point of being a little older now, to encourage you to find out what your passion is and follow it. Don't wait till 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road. And it doesn't come usually in the form of a lightning bolt, for very few people does it come like that. It comes with these little things that you hear, that you listen to and respect and follow. And if you affirm that inside yourself, it'll lead you the places that you want to go. And so for me, that was Wendell Berry, fantastic poet and writer, wrote a book called The Unsettling of America, which I know Tracy knows very well. He's a fantastic, he just won the Jefferson Award from the president. He's Francis Moore Lepay, and also a fellow named Albert Schweitzer. And these were books that I read that, as I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, were very influential. Schweitzer because not of so much what he did, which he's one of the best practitioners in Bach on the organ of anybody, but because he completely switched his life up at age 30 and went to start a hospital in Africa and spent the rest of his life serving other people. I was so impressed that a guy would put his life on like that. That made an impression to me that whatever I'm going to do, I want to make sure that I'm all in and helping others. So the mentors really have been my father. One of my father's great lines is "Don't ba when you can ba." Don't over talk, right? A business guy I had down the street, Dick Morris, because I didn't know retail business. I just opened up my little store when I was very young, and he had the hardware store down the street, and I watched him, how he did it, and I learned from him. And now I guess it would just, I love John too, the co-founder and co-CEO. I've learned so much from him over the years, and just different leaders. So I guess that's probably the best answer to that. Yeah.
So in terms of your leadership style and talking about a manager as a coach and sort of that leadership role, how do you give feedback to people? How do you coach your team, which I hear could go from the absolute top to sort of everyone working?
Yeah.
73,000 people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you learn about that with 77,000 people. It's not my job to give the store team leader the feedback unless we're in that situation where Michael's there, David's there, and it's, you got to respect all those sorts of things. That's just respectful. But the best way I've learned about feedback is to be direct, because if you got to go right at something. Mishing around it just it's not respectful to the person, and it's not respectful to the situation. And team members at Whole Foods expect leaders to respond to a situation directly, and if not, there's a consequence to all the rest of the people. So I've tried to learn to be, I think I'm a lot more direct than I used to be in terms of the feedback, the suggestions, and a lot more positive. Always the old sandwich thing, right? If you're going to throw something in there, wrap it with some constructive things. People are feelings, right? We're not giving feedback to machines. We're giving feedback to people who are sensitive, and I think you want to be, I try to read the person and see where they are, and at the same time, I've had difficult conversations with people. I've had difficult conversations with regional presidents, not with Michael, but I've had to sit down and say, listen, the performance is just not here, and I'm sorry we're having this conversation, but unless it changes, we're going to have to look at a change here. Mm-hmm. That's a difficult conversation, those sorts of conversations. But I think the direct honesty and is the best way to do the feedback.
So how do your team and you create that open environment so that people are comfortable and even open to that sort of direct feedback?
Well, I think it's the culture of the company. Whole Foods is swimming in feedback. If anything, we probably have too much feedback. But what sort of culture are you creating? What sort of culture do you have at Ross? What sort of culture do you have in any organization? Is it the way it is that people can receive feedback and give feedback? Or is it an atmosphere where there's much more controlled or repressive, or people are afraid to speak their mind? At Whole Foods, I think it's much more open, and so it's the norm to do it that way.
We have a quick question from Brian and Stephen, a few people, about the challenge of co-CEOs. How does decision making happen when you have that model?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, I would, in some ways, John is actually much more well known than I am, so that's good. We have one famous one and one that you don't know. That makes it easy. But actually, if you think about new business models for the 21st century, sharing responsibility, it's really kind of a neat idea. I mean, in some companies it hasn't really worked. Like if you look at BlackBerry or some of these other ones where it's kind of imploded, but what you do is you get the benefit. Remember that John and I have been friends for over 30 years, okay? So it's in the context of a lifelong friendship. Number two is I've been president and chief operating officer for 10 years, so we've had a close working relationship for a number of years. There was a basis for this arrangement. And also Whole Foods functions more by consensus than by so even on the executive team of Whole Foods for the last 10 years, we've been making most of the decisions together as a group. So in some ways, you've got that context for this sort of arrangement. But look, I think that if you can do it and it works, and the main thing is you have to constantly, you have to trust, and you also have to never do anything behind somebody's back, right? That just does not work. You've got to constantly think, if I'm thinking about doing something for the company, I'll talk to John, I'll give him the respect, and he will do the same thing with me. It doesn't mean we always agree. We have some knockdown, drag-out fights about what Whole Foods should do. We usually do them privately or an email or a phone call or something like that. And on the other hand, sometimes it spills out into the public. And I think it was interesting. We had this meeting, Michael will remember, a year ago or so, where we had a big disagreement on an issue, and it spilled out into the meeting where there was, I could see the room forming, like two camps. I wonder if John's listening to this right now. Two camps. It doesn't matter who was what. It was just I could see the senior leaders around the team wondering, oh, guys, I'm going to have to vote on this. Am I going to vote Walter's way or John's way? So I said, I realized that was the point where it stopped being constructive for the organization. And even though we had a difference of opinion, I threw the flag, or I said, John, if there's something that's really, really important to you, he's the founder of the company. I think he throws the flag, and I give him the respect that he's due and that he's earned in that role. And I'm good with that, because actually there's plenty for both of us to do. We have interest in sort of different things. John's really done his book. He's really interested in talking about how capitalism can evolve, larger mission of Whole Foods. I'm really interested in the whole cities thing and the things that we're going here. Mm-hmm. We support each other. We work off each other's ideas. And oftentimes when the dialogue happens, we create a new idea that we didn't individually think of. So those are some, and you know what, like any relationship, it takes check-ins. And we've had a time 6 months ago, I remember, where I could tell that he was out of sorts about it. So I said, let's go and we'll talk, stop what I was doing, let's just check in. How are we doing? Is there something I did that tweaked you? Or he'll say, is there something, I didn't? And you have to do those basic things in any relationship. And if you don't do those, if you don't tend to it, but right now we're just been in a really good place. And I think the Whole Foods benefits from having two folks that are thinking about things at the level that we do.
We're going to keep on moving through the conversation into our last 15 minutes, so please keep your tweets and emails coming. The next area I want to talk about is actually business in society. And one of the, we were talking about this a little bit before the session, Walter. One of the things that we might run into with positive business is the misconception that any organization could be all positive or all negative for that matter. In reality, we're all complex people, and organizations are complex. So I'm interested to hear from your perspective a two-part question. Of what are you most proud in Whole Foods' contribution to the world? And the second part is, where do you think that Whole Foods has the most room for improvement in pursuit of its mission?
Yeah, great questions. I think what I'm most proud about at Whole Foods. I think we've made a very big contribution to the changing dialogue about food and health in society. I think we have been we have really been major participants and contributors to that. And as a result, I think the conversation has changed about those things from where it was 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm really proud of the specific impacts we've had in the communities and through our foundations. We've impacted lots of individual lives and communities, and that's something to be very proud of. I'm very proud of our company's track record in that respect. In terms of what we have to learn, I think so much more. I mean, so much more. We painted a big world. You can see where we want to go. We have no idea how we're going to get there. We know where we'd like to shoot for. But boy, I don't come up with a good answer for that right now. I mean, there's lots. I mean, make no mistake about it. We're not perfect. We know that. We know that there's lots of things to learn. One of these ones is how we just continue to strengthen the culture with the growth. We want to pursue the opportunity. We want to make sure we do it in a way that's keeps all that intact. So that's one of the big ones that we're learning right now.
Yeah, one of the ones I know I got an input from some of the sustainability folks at the Robb Institute. Curious about how do you balance sourcing from such a disparate range of sources, of suppliers, and still make your environmental footprint as low as possible? How can you put those two things together?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at is that, with the number of stores we're opening in 5 years, we'll have to double our supply chain. So when you sit down and realize that fact, and we buy a lot of stuff from a lot of places, that's a big statement. That's a lot of work to do in thinking about how we could do that better. And there's some companies out there. Unilever, for example, has done a terrific job crafting sort of a plan, thinking about that. I've watched their progress over the last couple of years. I've been very impressed with that CEO, Paul Perlman. But for us, we think about that's a major. So not only do we have to get our own house in order in terms of our standards and the impact, but also potentially how do we get the dialogue with our supplier group in terms of their standards moving along simultaneously. So that's a big question for us right now. We're working on that.
Good. I'd love to hear a couple more questions from the audience.
Yeah. One was about sort of like leading in policy side of things, particularly on the sustainable food and production, things like that. Sort of, what do you see businesses' role in doing and pushing that sort of change on the policy side?
Yeah, policy is really squishy because I don't know if you guys get to Washington much, but it's like once you get in there, it's like inside baseball, and it's. I'm sure they're playing and hitting or something, but I don't see much coming out right now. So we have tended to, we don't have a representative in Washington. We've tended to, really focus on what are the things that we can do in a concrete fashion in the marketplace that are going to create change. We're going to set new standards. That's going to move the producer community along. We're going to do 100% of offset to our power with wind power. We're going to make a commitment to zero waste. We're going to make a commitment to 20% less electricity by 2015. We're going to make specific, concrete, measurable, deliverable commitments that I think the feeling is that maybe that starts to move the policy dialogue along. So we've chosen to go that way. Now there are the occasional initiative like Prop 37 in California where we got involved on a Yes for 37, which was the GMO labeling. We feel pretty strongly about transparency in food. And we there took a direct role in that. We actually ran some radio ads, which is unusual for us to do that. The Farm Bill, for example, that Oren's well familiar with, we kind of bat around in that thing a little bit, but my God, it's awful soupy. So we've chosen to use the power of our business to make, to sort of make our contribution to where we think things need to go.
Mm-hmm.
How about prices? There's a lot of people who have questions, Becky, Michael, and others about, particularly with opening a store in Detroit, how do you balance, opening in an area that's poor demographics with your price image, and how do you deal with the price image?
Yeah. Well, I went to the Detroit Economic Club in 2010. I made a promise there on behalf of our team that we would show up in Detroit and we would be competitive and we'd be affordable and we'd be accessible. And I said that, we have to figure out how we're going to do that. But we've gotten a lot of guidance from the community. And, again, they don't have as many choices in, say, in the Detroit example, and those are not necessarily that competitive as it is right now. They do have Eastern Market, which is a fantastic place. So what we've done is we've done some things like reach out to some of the major suppliers and ask them for consideration in the store, working with us. They're excited to do that. We're going to see how that lands. We're obviously looking at the price, a lot of the price points that happen in Whole Foods, because you've got a wide range of products from the lower end to the higher end. You got, and they told us that they're concerned about the higher end of products. Why does a $10 salsa, while it's maybe the best salsa with fresh serrano peppers, may not be something that's appropriate for that store. So I think we'll address the mix, we'll address the price points in the mix, and we'll just work a little harder on our gross margins to make sure that we can show up in a way that's affordable. We'll work a lot on the education piece. When you have fresh fruits and vegetables and bulk foods are very affordable if you know how to cook and you know how to use them. You can actually eat very well, very simply for very affordable. And but you have to know how to cook, and you have to recognize the foods. And so, is Akua here tonight? I don't know if is Akua here tonight. We have a full-time person, Akua Wilbright, who has been here for the last 6 months teaching cooking classes at our office in Detroit, and been 60, 70 people a pop twice a week, filled up, and helping people to understand how you can cook, how you can prepare a healthy meal. And again, for me, we're not holy foods, we're just whole foods, right? We're just giving people choices. And but I think the education piece around that is really important too. Because look, the price thing, the price thing is really it's like a ball of yarn you could start to unfold, because quality and price are related. Food is produced. To produce the true cost to produce healthy food, it's higher than to produce cheap food. And in the healthy foods, most of the costs are internalized in economic terms, and unhealthy food, lots of it's externalized, meaning the cost of pesticides, water runoff, community health, any of these things are not included in the cost of food. And so what matters to people, right? I mean, what choices do they want to make? And this price thing is that, Whole Foods is our first and foremost mission is selling the highest quality foods. That means, by definition, it may be more expensive. It isn't because our margins are richer than other people's margins, it's because the food costs more to produce. But it may not be the right food for everybody. So we got to balance the fact that we're a quality grocer with the fact that we want it to be affordable and accessible. And that's the experiment that is Detroit, and you'll have to come see how it turns out.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm going to keep rolling into the next topic, and this is actually the final full topic here to go through. A quick question for you. Roughly how often or how many times a year do you get the chance to go to a university and give a guest session like today?
Maybe 3 or so, something like that.
3 times a year.
So
I feel very lucky that you joined us for 2 sessions of the class today, which means that you have 1 more left elsewhere this year. The reason I'm raising that, Walter, is that 2 weeks ago,
I'll tell you why I do it.
Please do.
Here's why I do it. Because I look at all you, particularly in the class today, and I see young people that, from where I sit, represent the future. You're the future business leaders. You're the future people that are going to guide the decision-making of the world. And from what I can tell, a lot of times the things that people tell you in business fill your head with ideas that I don't agree with. And I want you to have at least another point of view to think about as you're making these decisions about what you're going to do with your life and how you're going to build a business and how you're going to think about business. And I'm very hopeful when I see you and I listen to your questions and the quality of your thinking, and I know that you understand this interdependence thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping that our team, by coming here and spreading a little bit of what we're thinking, will be helpful to you. And but I can tell you, we get as good as we give here. We learn a lot from you. You help us to see things that we can't see for ourselves, and it's a very wonderfully rich experience for us to come. So that's why we come.
Well, we're grateful for you and the team and being with us today.
Yeah.
And I think this commitment that you have to visiting schools and doing sessions like this gives you a special perspective on the role and the mission of business education and the contribution it can make. It's actually good timing for you coming in. 2 weeks ago, Dean Alison Davis-Blake publicly announced the mission of Ross as being to develop or prepare business leaders who make a positive difference in the world.
Love it.
And there's layers of detail below that, but that was the mission statement. So speaking as one of those business leaders who, for myself, consider as making a positive difference in the world, I'll let others make their own minds up, but for myself, I feel that way. What would you say are the things that the Ross School can do to develop leaders like that, to make a positive difference in the world?
Yeah. Well, when I came a couple of years ago, your mission was mishmash, right? It was a hard, I couldn't even find it. I don't know why And again, already from our company, we think it starts with purpose. It starts with why are you doing whatever you're doing, right? If you're not clear about that, how in the world are you going to accomplish anything? So I think you've done the work, you've come up with something that's clear, and now you know why you're here and what you're here to do, and folks sign up for that. And this generation checks all that stuff out on the web before they apply. They want to line up with something that they believe in. So I think that's a great start. But I think by exposing them to different ways of thinking, different companies, different views of the world, particularly, I think it'd be some fun to have dialogues where you had maybe someone who didn't agree with me up here. We could talk about the role of the free market. We could talk about any of these sort of dialogues that are out there right now that give students a different point of view on these questions. and how business can contribute to these things would be helpful. And I think also making sure you keep it real for the students, because, you know, the theoretical thing is great in school, but man, I'll tell you, the marketplace is real. So when you're thinking about problems, it came up in class today, and I said, hey, this particular team that presented, why don't you come over, get hooked up with Red Elk, come over to our store and ask these questions, but ask when you're actually talking to team members who are dealing with these training questions and like that. So find a way to keep it real in the world when you're considering these questions, so you don't get way out there with some theoretical thing, and then, you know, you have to come back in and you have to make it work in the world. So I think having a real component, whether it's an entrepreneur requirement, you know, Earth University in Costa Rica, they make the students actually start a business in their 4th year, which I think is a very cool idea. So any sort of a real component like that, I think, would be a great addition to the curriculum. So.
Well, I'll look forward to following up with you after to do the scheduling for that next session.
Red Elk is right there. So.
Let's take a couple more questions, and then we'll move to the wrap-up.
Well, in terms of like real-world experience, there's a lot of people who have questions about metrics. And it's like in school we learn like NPV and very specific metrics. At Whole Foods, what metrics matter, particularly when you're determining the success of a project like Detroit? Like, what are you looking for as a success point?
Well, I mean, I would argue the single most important metric that you're looking at is your morale, your turnover, you know, those sorts of things tell you the health of your culture, the health of your company, the health of the fabric and the connection in your company. But if you're talking about financial metrics, you've got the health of your balance sheet, you know, I mean, what's your debt equity, what's your liquidity, what's your ability to borrow, you know, all those sorts of metrics. We certainly, you know, understand our balance sheet, look at all that stuff. The P&L, obviously that's a common vocabulary in retail operations is looking at those sorts of things. You talk about Detroit as an interesting example because we're willing to, again, because we're at the point where we are now, we're able to bend the metrics a little bit for that. I'm not sure, it is an investment. It takes, this store will probably spend, what, $10, $11 million, Michael, for this store? So I don't want to lose money, but I think that the metric will be, in Detroit, it's a little more intangible in terms of the return to community. And our philosophy in Detroit has been return to community. If we work on putting the community first, we will get the return to the company. Do I know exactly how that's going to look yet? I don't. But I have enough faith that this is right thinking, that it'll come our way. And we've really tried to make our investment in that spirit over the last couple of years. And we'll see how it turns out. I'm hoping that this will lead us to other cities in other ways. And what is happening, of course, is that we're getting some help from the different parts of the business model, right? There's a developer that's been participating. The city did some help on some of the credits to the developer, which allowed us to bring some of the costs down to the whole business model. Those sorts of things we're learning. But, typically the metric is just return on invested capital, return on equity, that sort of thing. But for this one here, I think it will perform. I really do. But giving it a little wider berth here initially to see how it kind of goes. And because I want to stay true to the idea of the community first, or getting to Whole Foods return through the community.
So, from your just perspective,
if the stakeholder philosophy of capitalism is right, then it says that if you are thinking about your business in terms of all your stakeholders, if you're looking at win-win scenarios, if you're looking at different combinations, if you're synthesizing your stakeholders in different new ways, then you will find return. And I'm trusting that thinking is right thinking. So, yeah, sorry.
So are we learning what businesses, or these sort of more conscious capitalism type of businesses, are we learning here in an MBA program what we really need to be leaders in that space?
Or, I don't know, are we?
Outside opinion.
Outside opinion.
A bunch of people are looking for an outside opinion.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know enough about what you're learning other than the class that we participated in, but there's a great dialogue between John and Milton Friedman that you can find online, which was kind of a discussion about the stakeholder thing and the stockholder. And it was dinner. We went to dinner that night with John and Milton and his wife Rose. They're both gone now, but fascinating discussion about how you think about growing a company and all that sort of thing. But so I don't know enough about your curriculum, but I think that continue to expose yourself to that sort of, I would look at where you find interesting things is where you find the conflict between stakeholders. And if you explore that conflict, you will find growth and progress. And so you actually want to embrace those moments that are difficult. So I think setting up conversations, setting up dialogue, setting up case studies where you're looking at conflicts like that actually leads you to new conclusions about what's possible. So look, there's a lot of great companies out there right now doing amazing things, and there's a lot of young companies doing amazing things. And I met this fellow the other day, that's got this pencil company, Pencils for Purpose or something like that. And he said, I'm no longer a nonprofit, I'm a for-purpose organization. And I thought that was a lovely way of thinking about it. There's a lot of, because technology is enabling so many companies to start so quickly and even scale, you've got this tremendous possibility through business that I don't think we had even 5-10 years ago. So, are you bringing in young entrepreneurs to the Ross? Are you bringing them here on stage and putting them up here and having them talk and all that?
On the stage? Not necessarily.
Okay. Well, I think there's a lot to learn from that generation of folks that are creating businesses right now. Yeah.
So with the MBA students here, what could an MBA...
One example, two young guys from Haas Business School in Berkeley. They were offered full jobs at Goldman. They turned them down. They started this little company called Back to the Roots, BTTR, which they took coffee grounds put it in recycled, and you grow mushrooms in it. They sell you a kit. And these guys are 4 years in. They were named Entrepreneurs of the Year by Goldman Sachs contest, ironically enough. And they just launching their second product, which is a box that you put into the aquarium, and it grows plants, and it cleans up the fish tank. Who likes to clean the fish tank, right? It cleans up the fish tank. And they just gained placement at Petco. These are 4 years in out of business school, and they've done a wonderful job. So I think people like this would have a lot, stories like that, and there's lots of them, would have a lot to. Kristen and Kirsten has started Revolution Foods. You know that story as well. These folks took on the task of bringing healthy food to school districts, which are under-resourced and challenged, and they're now serving, they've just taken on venture capital money. They're now growing and serving over 1,000 schools in the United States with fresh, healthy foods that they've put this little business model together. And these are 4 years out of business school, and they're rocking and rolling. So lots of examples of what's possible when you get a clear idea what you want to do.
So if an MBA student didn't choose the entrepreneurial path, but really wanted to be an entrepreneur within Whole Foods, where would sort of the space you'd recommend a student coming out of here, entering the Whole Foods, where should they start? Where should they start making contributions?
Well, it's funny, we actually have an MBA program. We started a few years ago. Man, we're not as smart as we should be. We need to go get a bunch of MBAs, because none of us I didn't go to business school, so we don't have any. We're all self-taught. We don't have any. We go get some MBAs, and so we actually set up a program for the regional presidents to go bring them in, and we would spread the difference on the salary. And we find out, though, a lot of the MBAs, they want to run the international M&A department, or they want to run corporate finance. And I said, well, no, we're a retail grocery company. We'll put you in the seafood department, and we'll cover your wage spread, and you got to learn the business from the ground up. And what we found is very few stick. Michael has one that stuck from Washington University in St. Louis that's still with us now, and he's going to be successful. He's going to making his way through. He's going to be a leader in the company, and I think he will be. And so, I guess it depends on you're willing to get your hands dirty, but whatever company you go to, we're in the food business. You may choose somebody else that's in some other business, right? Start wherever you are, and I think you can make an impact in any company that you join if you have the mindset to do it. And you're respectful of the company that you're joining. Respectful of the fact it took a long time for that company to get where they are, and you're not going to change it tomorrow, but get in there and work for what you believe, yeah.
Very cool.
Well, on that note, we're through to the final question of the session. And the final question is, let me check again. Put your hands up, the group who said you're graduating in 2.5 months. To these people, what is your wish or challenge that you'd like to extend as they leave this evening?
Good luck.
Thank you, good night.
Well, the challenge is that, I think you guys are, in some ways, you're very blessed to have this opportunity to be here in Ann Arbor, to go to this wonderful school, to get this quality education. You have already, by definition, you have things that most people in the world don't have. And that it makes you privileged. It also makes you more responsible to do something with it. And as you are at that place where you're thinking about what you want to do with your life, I think carrying that responsibility in some sort of appropriate manner is right. I mean, obviously you got to pay your bills, but there's a world out there that needs a lot of change, needs a lot of impact. And I would just simply say this, that amazing things are possible if you're willing to face your fear and go through it anyways. And like I said earlier, I would really encourage you to use this time to examine what you want to do with your life. I had a college professor, I've told the story before, but I had a college professor who, Jerry Irish, who the final for our religious studies class was a take-home exam. Who are you, and in what or whom do you find guidance for the conduct of your life? That was the final exam. But seriously, that's the sort of question that you should be asking yourself now. You've got this great education, you've got this responsibility to use these skills and bring it to the world to make a better world. I hope you're not just in it for yourself. I hope you're in it for the bigger picture, for the well-being of humanity and the improvements that need to happen to build a better society and a better world, because there's so much that needs to happen, and you have a part to play in that. And so I hope you take those responsibilities seriously, and that the best way for you to do that, the best way for you to discharge those responsibilities is to be in the zone of doing what is really important to you. No one expects you to live somebody else's life or somebody else's values, and the sooner you realize that, you have to make those decisions for yourself and put together a life that's meaningful to you. Then you'll hit the zone, and then you will really be on fire. And it may take you a couple tries to get there, but listen to those things inside of yourself to craft that path for yourself that is going to light your fire. Because when your fire is lit, then magic happens, and that's what I hope happens for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank firstly Ira and Sabrina for being your voices for this evening. Thank you for all of the tweets and emails that flooded in.
I have to say, there's a lot of comment about the socks. People love the socks. I just couldn't. There's too many emails about the socks.
These are PACA from LA. It's all 100% recycled yarn.
At least
they do underwear too, but I don't have them on. So.
We need to cut off the live stream right now.
Boxers or briefs, right? Yeah.
Thank you for your input. The Englishman is getting uncomfortable with this conversation. What I'd like to do also is thank you, Walter, for coming in. In terms of a personal impact of this conversation on me, I lead a center called the Center for Positive Organizational Scholarship, which is a specific field of study and inquiry into the science of building organizations that bring the best out of people, and I get the job of helping to spread that. But when we talk about positive business and positive leadership, I really view those both educationally and in the world as an aspiration for us as a school and as companies. And so I wanted to thank you for being an inspiration to those of us who are hoping to lead positive businesses in the future.
Thank you.
So thank you
very
all.
much. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.